Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is about enhancing KYC onboarding and lifecycle for asset servicing. We're excited to have you with us as we explore the key challenges fund industry players face during the KYC onboarding and lifecycle management process. Drawing from our client interactions and market feedback, we gathered valuable insight that we will be sharing today, along with practical solutions to help you streamline and optimize your onboarding workflows. Here's what we have lined up. The agenda of today. First part, setting the scene. We'll dive into the key challenges stakeholders face during KYC onboarding, from collecting and verifying documentation to managing complex entity structures and mitigating risks linked to manual processes. Then there'll be the live demo. We'll demonstrate how automation can streamline KYC workflows, improve data collection and lifecycle management, thereby enhancing client onboarding experiences. Then there'll be the interactive poll. We want this session to be dynamic, so we'll run a live poll to capture your insights and hear about your KYC related experiences. There'll be also an exclusive reveal. Stay tuned for an exclusive preview of our newest KYC onboarding features, including a sneak peek at our enhanced case management and monitoring capabilities. Obviously, there's always a Q&A session, so we'll wrap up with an open Q&A session. But in the meantime, feel free to send in your questions anytime during the webinar using the chat button. I'll now hand over to Stefan, our head of sales, to walk you through this webinar.
Thank you, Jonathan. So to start, we wanted to basically introduce this webinar through basically sharing a few pain points that we have identified with our clients. So some recurring themes that came up through a discussion with clients and mainly financial institutions which are faced during KYC onboarding and KYC related lifecycle management. So the following key points are based directly on the insight that we gathered from our interactions, highlighting both the obstacles that fund administrators and overall financial players face in Luxembourg related entities and the solutions that can really drive efficiency gains. So we'll first take a closer look at the main KYC challenges faced by our clients, and then we'll explore a bit how lifecycle management tools can help streamline both KYC as well as KYA processes, as knowing your assets is also a recurring topic that came up in our clients' interactions for a smoother and more compliant client journey. So first, when it comes to the challenges, we obviously face that the increased regulatory scrutiny is one of the key problems that our clients are facing. So the rising regulatory demands are making onboarding more complex and overall time consuming. Second, we have overall the manual handling of the KYC onboarding related tasks. So the manual processes tend to cause delay, increase errors, and expose firms to also increase compliance risk. So overall, the processes tend to still be quite manual. Moving on, we also have the increased client complexity. So most of our clients in the financial industry are serving quite complex corporate structures, so be funds or special purpose vehicles, and managing the requirements related to those type of entities remains quite a major challenge. And then finally, we have the resulting long onboarding processes, which despite automation tend to remain quite long and lengthy due to the complexity of the data collection. So that's for the problem faced. Now, when it comes to how can actually lifecycle management tools help streamline processes as much on the KYC as much as the KYA side, we have identified a few topics that tools such as our KYC Manager tool can assist our clients with. So first, the efficient client outreach. So overall, we identify that client interaction is quite a problem, and basically simplifying the client outreach to enable them to more easily provide information is something that clearly comes forward and helps with the client experience. Second, overall, we also have the automated risk and compliance related tasks. So basically automating risk assessment, document collection, as well as compliance checks helps the team also focus on the less repetitive tasks. So covering basically the tools having the tool covering the automated task helps the teams basically to focus on what should be less repetitive. Also, the real-time monitoring, so basically helping the teams with the continuous monitoring and real-time updates across both client and assets can help streamlining the overall lifecycle management of those entities. And then finally, having proactive risk detection. So to that extent, having automated workflows, intelligent triggers help basically identify more easily the changes in client and asset profiles early, and therefore improving the time required to perform the additional checks and overall help streamline the lifecycle management, and in turn then improves the risk management capabilities that the team have into play. Now, we want to now move on to, as Jonathan said, to the poll, as we want to keep this interactive, and wanted to share a few insights that we gathered from our client interaction, as well as market research. So we wanted to evaluate to the extent whether you share the perception that the market has in terms of certain pain points in regards to the KYC topic. So the first question to that extent is like, what do you believe is the percentage of financial institutions identified as a lack of integration between the KYC system and other business systems as a major challenge? So you should have now a pop-up with a few percentage results, so you can answer those questions up in the poll. Okay, I see that almost everybody just responded. One extra second. Okay, so the main answer was 55%, and the answer to this poll was indeed 55%. So overall, more than half indeed are still experience quite a lack of integration into KYC system and other business system. So this resulting lack of integration is definitely one key issue that companies are facing, as most processes still tend to be siloed. Second point is like, what is the percentage of financial institutions that struggle to balance compliance with KYC regulations and maintaining a smooth client onboarding process too? So to what extent is KYC becoming a pain point for onboarding? Okay, so the answers here indeed are also quite significant towards the higher end, meaning 50% and 60%. And the result was indeed as well 60%. So I think this one is very clear that collecting information and requesting information from clients is becoming really quite a pain point, which becomes a hurdle for a smooth onboarding for most of the players here in the for working in financial institution in Luxembourg. So what percentage as well of firms now are relying on manual processes and report difficulties in managing KYC data for clients with complex ownership structures? Right, well, even clearer. So here, almost 80% of you now answered for the 55. So indeed, that was as well the correct part. So indeed, having basically manual processes connected to complex ownership structures is indeed quite a significant pain point for, again, financial institution. And finally, the last question being, what percentage of organizations still face significant challenges in gathering sufficient KYC documentation during the client onboarding due to manual processes? So those questions are quite similar, but but is this time more focused on the data collection side. And indeed, okay, so again, 90%. So I think the pain points have clearly been identified as well to that extent. So indeed, it's 60%. So again, asking client to provide documentation is quite a pain point in those processes. And again, that is one of the reasons on why KYC onboarding processes tend to be quite complex and time consuming. So moving on from this questionnaire and this slide intro, we wanted to help and give you an overview on how we assist clients with our tool KYC Manager and the extent to which the tool helps streamlining those processes. So to begin with, let me give you a brief overview of what KYC Manager is and what it does. So overall, it could be summarized to be basically a single platform that helps our clients manage compliance processes and also helps them involve other stakeholders within the process. So in terms of activities, KYC Manager covers 3 main tasks. So it helps with client onboarding to begin with, then also takes over the whole lifecycle management process, as well as the continuous monitoring. And then it also covers the remediation campaigns, which are basically 2 specific use case of an onboarding, but more focused on a specific short duration in time. So that's for the main activities covered by the tool, which then has different users connecting to the platform. And in terms of users, the main users of the platform are the compliance officers and the KYC risk teams who connect to the platform to manage the KYC processes and related tasks they have to perform on the daily basis. But the tool also has the capability to leverage and intermediate additional third-party users, which are what you see on the left-hand side. So the intermediary users, in this case, can be relationship managers, front office teams, or brokers. So any party that our clients might be working with and wants to intermediate in the process. So again, those are, for instance, in the context of, let's say, insurance companies, it would be brokers with which the insurance companies could be working with. So you can actually replicate this logic to different industries, but as soon as you want to intermediate other stakeholders, they can also have access to their respective client portfolio through the platform. And then what you have on the right-hand side are the investors and end clients, which can be individuals, but also multi-person structures and corporate structures who can connect to the platform and also provide information who is then pushed to the users I was just mentioning before. Moving on, the way the platform then works, it's a centralized, modular, and scalable platform. So the idea here is like you have this similar chart as the one I just showed before. You have in the center KYC Manager with the various modules that our clients can pick and choose. So for instance, if they want to identify certain users or person, they can have the identification and validation module. They also have the automated data and document enrichment module, UBO verification, case management and continuous risk monitoring, risk scoring, digital signature, AML, and adverse media screening. So all these modules that are basically processes that compliance team have to cover can be picked and chosen through the platform. And in order to leverage those sub-processes, we also work with third-party solutions such as ID Now, Dow Jones, or Grading. So to give you some example, ID Now is a third-party provider that basically helps and verifies the authenticity of identification documents such as IDs and passports or driving licenses. So as soon as a user or a ultimate beneficial owner needs to provide an identification document, this module will assist the client, the end client in this case, or end ultimate beneficial owner, in providing his identification document and verifying the authenticity of that document. Likewise, we also have the possibility to run screenings against sanction list, adverse media screening. So we'll be working with third-party solutions such as Dow Jones, LexisNexis, in those cases, or Refinitiv, to basically perform the screenings on the clients that needs to be run. And as well, we also have the possibility to automate have an automated data population of client data, the client enrichment, basically. And in this case, we'll be working with providers such as Graydon or Dun & Bradstreet, where basically the corporate information of clients will be automatically fetched in those providers' databases to help feed the data. So overall, having this modular approach in which we also rely on third-party provider helps covering all those various aspects that compliance team needs to cover. And then what you see on the left-hand side is that we tend to then connect via API our platform KYC Manager to our client's internal system. So may they be whatever core systems, client relationship management systems, ERP or data management system, to ensure that the data is properly fed into the system. So basically that's for the feeding. And then what you see on the right-hand side is the secure web connection to end investors and end clients, which, as I was mentioning before, can also involve the intermediary users, again, may they be brokers or front office teams, into this process to help them also retrieve information from investor and end client, and then have this end-to-end process where an investor's client provide information in KYC Manager, which is then pushed back into client and company systems to ensure consistency across multiple systems. So that's the way the platform works. And the way Finology seeks to stand out in those processes is basically through, to begin with, the IT security that we cover to begin with. So ensuring that the whole environment, considering that we are working with financial institution, is up to the latest market and regulatory requirements. This also falls onto the fact that we are also a regulated entity to that extent, and we also provide the operational support as part of the delivery of our product to that extent. So the tailored configuration and the whole support that we offer makes it more easy and more relevant for financial institutions to work with us, especially in this modular approach, where they pick and choose the module with the associated service that comes with it. So moving on, the idea now is to move on to the demo of the platform as well as the tool as moving on with the next poll. So I'll just share the screen to this extent. Up. Okay. So what I'll be doing now is log into the platform and give you an overview how this would work for our clients. So I just connected to the platform, and the way it works is you have different roles. So when people from the compliance team log into the platform, they will first land on a dashboard that will give them an overview of what's taking place into the platform. So overall, you have the ongoing files, the number of persons in charge of the files, and you have also the possibility to have different types of roles. So if I move on to a compliance officer, I would now have an overview on a different dashboard that gives me, for instance, the overview of the entire client files that I'm managing, whereas if I'm working within a compliance team, I would only see what has been assigned to me in particular. And the same logic also applies when we are involving third-party stakeholders in the platform, such as the brokers, which I was mentioning before, where they would have a segregated access, only being only able to see the files that are relevant to them. So this dashboard gives you this overall view as well as certain reminders. So to the example being that we have, for instance, certain expired proof of identity documents that can be reflected here, which then translate, for instance, into automated reminders to the client saying that they have to update the identity document. So this is a general overview of the dashboard. And then you have the file section, so the dossier section, which is let's say the core part of the tool where all the client files are listed, and then the person connecting has an overview of what needs to be performed on the various files. So you have typically a name for a file, a dossier number, a client associated to a file, a dossier status. So that's internally as part of the KYC and compliance team. They know what's the status internally within the team. Flow status. So here it's when you generate an outreach to an investor or a client, inviting him to provide information. You can evaluate where he stands in the process, and then you can associate a risk score and an internal assessment level as well to the file. So I'll be using corporate case in this webinar as most of the clients we are working with have this as more relevant, because as we were mentioning before already in the poll, the client complexity related to the corporate structures that our clients have to manage is more relevant to these type of situations, which is why I will deep dive into these type of corporate examples to give you an idea of how this could look like. So first you have information about the file, which is called dossier in this case, where you have high-level information such as the dossier name, the number, and so on. So this can all be tailored to your company's needs. You also have a risk score that is automatically calculated and is based on your internal risk matrix. So again, Phenology will here implement your own risk matrix into the platform to ensure that it's consistent across your internal risk matrix and your internal policies and procedures to that extent. You can as well associate a set of tasks. So here it's more in the logic of the periodic review, where you can perform and assign various tasks to a file. You also can assign questionnaires, various documents, again at file level. So one important specification, and I'll get that in a minute, is that here I'm at file level, and then you assign a client to a file. The idea being that at file level you can engulf more additional information which might, for instance, impact the risk level. So for instance, you have the notion of related parties, so you can say that, okay, this file has a link with the company and GFS partners. So in this case, I took the example of our company Phenology, to which GFS would be the shareholding company. And as well, you can perform an enhanced due diligence, which is based on various criteria. So maybe listed information is the company listed. So again, all those criteria are typically always tailored based on our client's needs and will influence the risk score of the company. And then finally, you have an important section, which is the dossier responsible section, which is the section where you can actually interact with a client and provide information and ask him to provide information to the database. So to that extent, you can interact with maybe the CFO, the compliance officer, in different ways and define how you want to interact with the client. So first, either the counterparty is not present, so typically via email, inviting them to connect, or you can also do this if the counterparty is present and provide information, for instance, in the office and sign digitally. So multiple ways are possible to interact with the client at this level. We also have clients who work on a paper base. So here it's like the client will receive a paper mail inviting him to connect on the link, on the URL, to provide information, and he will provide a unique code that will enable him to be identified. So if I now invite this, I can now invite the person to connect. So obviously when we work with our client, this is done in bulk, and to that extent, an invitation is sent to the client and he will then receive an email inviting him to connect to the platform. So what you see here is then typically a white label email that the client receives and invites him to connect to the platform. And by clicking on the link, he would then connect on the platform. So I'll do this right here. I will click on complete profile, and by doing so, the client can then authenticate himself. So to that extent, he will then connect through an SMS OTP that he'll receive, and he can start then provide the information that has been requested from him. So various questionnaires can be reflected. So to that extent, what you see now is an example that we have come up with for a client. So various all our questionnaires tend to be different because we are collecting different information from investors or clients. So the client provides all the information to begin with this client details. So in this case, about the corporate information. He moves on, he provides the information about any politically exposed person, whether if it's a FATQA questionnaire, if it's relevant to the client or not. He moves on. So he has a client questionnaire, CRS classification. So obviously we always tailor the client's the workflows to our client's needs. The client can evaluate where he stands in the workflow, and that's also how the information is shared then with the compliance team, where they can track where the client is in the workflow, because he can pause this workflow and provide information later on if where any document which might be required can be paused and uploaded later on. So again, here the client can upload certain documents, which, since the workflow is dynamic, can also be identified and requested based on what the client previously answered in the workflow. So based on the answer that he provided earlier on in the questionnaire will adapt itself and request certain documents or not. And it's again the client who defines what is mandatory to what is not. So he provides information to that extent, okay, and you can also provide information, for example, about ultimate beneficial owners. And for instance, in this context, we have Jonathan, who is the ultimate beneficial owner of the company. I can also ask him, what I was mentioning before, to upload, for instance, a proof of identity. So here a sub workflow would be initiated where Jonathan would be invited to just provide his identity document and sign, for instance, through a third-party provider such as ID Now. And then when the client has provided all the information, or rather the person who provided all the information on behalf of the client, a profile is generated, and he can review all the information he provided to ensure that it's consistent with what he wanted. So he can see all the documents that has been listed, review that it's correct, for instance, all the various corporate documents that have been uploaded, proof of residence, deed, articles of incorporations, and so on. And if he agrees with it, he then can click on confirm. And at this stage, it's also where we can include and integrate electronic signature if relevant. So we have various clients who have included this in the process, depending on the workflow they wanted to have into place. And when he's done, he can then download the profile if he wishes, and he is done for his part of the work. And then moving back, now I have to just log out and log back in to that extent. And by doing so, you see that the dossier status of the company here of this client file A Phenology has been submitted by the client. So the dossier changed, and I see an action list that pops up. And again, I'm logged here as a compliance officer, and I see everything that needs to be done on my end. So I have to complete all tasks from the task list. So here, review everything, as well as perform all the various tasks. And I see here again on the dossier responsible section that the client provided the dossier information, the client information, the ultimate beneficial owner information, as well as signed the document. So I see that all these steps have been completed. And now the question is, to what extent and where can I find all these information? Well, that's on this time on the client section. Again, the client is associated to the file. And here I will find all the information that the client provided. So everything that he has inputted will be reflected here. All the company information, the tax information, the ultimate beneficial owners. And here I can evaluate at what stage Jonathan will be uploading his identification documents, which I can approve or not. I can see as well the related parties, so meaning the link with which the company Phenology has an established relationship. So this can also be identified. So we see here the various links that can be put into place. Again, those are all examples. So is it an asset trustee, a board member, a contact person? So you can identify the links with which a company has another link. The idea being that, again, if, for instance, a shareholding company or a link company, for instance, is reflected on a sanction list, this could, for instance, impact the risk score of the company. So you find all this information here. You then have all the documents that the client uploaded and that the compliance officer can then start reviewing. So the various documents can be checked, and then a review can be performed on the document to define to what extent the client is either in order or not, is additional information required, and if so, you can then start interacting with the client saying, okay, the information that you provided was correct with the exception of document A, can you please provide an updated version, for instance. Additionally, you also have then the customer due diligence, which is reflected at this stage. So that's what I was mentioning also before when I was saying that you also have the possibility to perform screenings on your clients, on your counterparties. And to that extent, you have the integration with the providers such as Dow Jones or Refinitiv, which are reflected here. And basically the screenings would run automatically at the frequency that you define. And should the client be flagged on a list, it would be reflected here. And you would also have in the document section the statement from the provider, again, Dow Jones or Refinitiv, that can be retrieved and saved at this level in the document section of the tool. So you have this various information and processes who are running and performed at this level. So again, you also have the notion of linked dossier. So the idea here is that you can see that the company phenology might be involved in various client files depending on how the activity in the segment that you're in. So to take the example of an insurance company or a fund, you could have the case that one corporate entity or one client is actually involved in multiple insurance policies or multiple funds, and then he would be reflected in these various funds or client files. So you could see, okay, this client has also a link in company A, B, and C. So we don't need to perform these KYC processes on a redundant basis, and we see that it's already, the client is already reflected there. So you find all these informations, all the checks can be performed at this level, and then going back at dossier level, you then have the possibility as well to see the history of the profile. So the workflow that the client shared can be downloaded. So you can also see, okay, how was this client file a year ago, 6 months ago? So you have the possibility to go back in time to see what has changed to that extent. You then also have an activity log to see an audit, to have an audit trail overall on what took place on this client file over and who performed changes for audit purposes and for regulatory compliance. To that extent, this is all tracked and traced. And you have as well a summary of the client file. So this is the case for instance, certain files which can be very complex. Sometimes we have clients who want also to have a summary that they can share more easily information with the management, and then management can have an overview of the risk score and the tasks that need to be performed. So they have, for decision making, also this possibility to have a review, streamlined and summarized view of the client file. Again, you then also have the open actions and the various status on what needs to be done on the file, and gives an overview of the status of the client. And then finally, you have as well the client section and the party section, which is basically a whole listing of the client database, which is reflected on in the tool. So overall, the tool's purpose is really to cover those processes and to simplify the work as much as possible when it comes to simplify client interaction, so you can really ensure that you have an easy way to interact with a client, to update documentation easily when lifecycle management tasks need to be performed. So typically the way it would be orchestrated is that on a predefined basis, based, for instance, on the risk level or whatever criteria has been identified in the risk policy, a client file would then be reopened on a predefined basis, and then the client would be requested, for instance, to check, please, I see that you uploaded your information a year ago. Can you please confirm that everything is still correct? And if not, upload the documentation that needs to be updated. So this would be an example of a lifecycle management use case, whereas obviously in the context of an onboarding, if no information is already available, the client can provide information from scratch. And to that extent, when we go back to the onboarding use case, that's also how I was mentioning that third-party data providers are relevant, is if you go into the document section, and that's what we see on a more frequent basis now. The document section can also has the possibility to be connected to those third-party providers I was mentioning, such as Graydon. And instead of having the client providing those informations, those documents would be automatically fetched into those databases. So typically, it's really corporate information, articles of association, and those types of documents that would be fetched automatically. And this typically prevents the client from not having to provide those information, as those information would already be automatically retrieved, and then the client only has to perform and provide the information that only he has on his end. So this gives you a very rapid overview and summary of the platform and how it runs and how it operates, and hopefully gives you the view on how it could assist you in those processes. So for the purpose of this webinar, I will not now deep dive into further steps, but we hope this gives you already a decent overview of how it could assist certain processes. So now I'll get back to the questionnaire, in the sense that what we wanted to share with you is as well, maybe evaluate what you identify as being certain pain points that you are facing today. So to that extent, we came up with a couple of questions because we want to evaluate what your pain points are and what are the pain points that the challenges that your firm is experiencing today in terms of KYC obligations. So to that extent, the first question we had is like, what's your firm's biggest KYC obligation and challenge across operation? So we have a few questions here again popping up. So the first one being like, okay, it's collecting and verifying client documents. That is the biggest challenge for you, or it's keeping client data up to date across multiple jurisdictions. It's managing remediation and ongoing due diligence efficiently, or ensuring regulatory compliance with evolving rules. And okay.
Could be your challenges and also your clients' challenges.
Okay, so we see again some consistency here. So basically either all of the above, or the first one, meaning collecting and verifying the client documents, keeping the data up to date across multiple jurisdictions, as well as managing the remediation and the ongoing due diligence efficiently. So we see these tend to be ongoing and related problems, which is why probably most of you answered all of the above. Then we only had 3 questions this time. So the second one being, what is your biggest bottleneck in the remediation process if you are actually running one? So either identifying the clients which require this, or gathering the updated documents, or ensuring the clients respond in timely manner, or tracking and closing the remediation case efficiently. So again, we have here, okay, either all of the above, or ensuring that client respond in a timely manner, which is also what we observed. So really identifying the clients, gathering the missing information, and ensuring that client respond in a timely manner. So that's really something we're trying to assist through, one, the workflow of KYC Manager. So really having an automated process defining, okay, these documents are approaching expiry date, so we need something we need to update these documents. So really the client outreach and the client updating processes really help with those processes, as well as having an overview on this, because then automated reminders can also be sent on a predefined basis through the platform and helps automating these processes basically. So this kind of like connects with what we observe. And then finally, last question being, which area of your KYC process would you like to optimize the most? So either the data collection process, the document verification, the risk assessment, the client communication, remediation and updates, or all of the above. Okay, so overall, it's again the remediation and updates and all of the above. So basically, the logics related to having an ongoing and lifecycle management process is what we also try to assist our client with by defining, okay, to what frequency should workflows be sent to the clients to retrieve information. So defining so both in a logic of lifecycle management as well as in a logic of remediation campaign, where we identifying what is missing and collecting the information from the clients is really what we trying to assist our client with through those outreach, the automated reminders, as well as the simplified communication, because this also helps not having to rely on multiple channels and having something automated where the client can easily connect to the platform and provide the information in due time when he has the information. So those are generally, even if the platform covers a lot of aspects through its modular approach, at the end, the simplified outreach and asking the client to provide just as less information as possible to ensure that the information is really consistent across systems is really how we can help our client with the KYC processes in those digitalization steps, basically. So really to help streamline and focus on what is relevant instead of having a large chunk of client who needs to be remediated and having not a clear overview of what actually needs to be done and with what client. So this helps really giving a better overview and helps with the outreach to the client, to the end investor and the end client. And finally, the one information. So thank you for your information and sharing those pain points that you are facing with us today. And before moving on to the Q&A section, we wanted also to share a few upcoming trends. So basically what we have identified across our clients as being the upcoming trends and what we see our clients are doing. So the first step here was really significant trend towards mutualization and platformization. So that's really two trends that we identified. So first one, mutualization and platformization, and second, the collection of client information from third-party solutions. So when it comes to mutualization and platformization, so one example here is really that we observed with one of our clients. It's mutualization data across group level. So the use case here would be across the Crédit Agricole group. So the client that we are working with here is Fund Channel, so a transfer agent, part of the Crédit Agricole group. And what they do is they're really focusing on sharing client data and mutualizing it across group level. The idea being that basically the financial institution here is really seeking to move from towards a shared KYC framework to basically reduce redundant operations. So the idea here is that they are performing the KYC not only on their own behalf, but also on the behalf of the other entities of the group, which basically prevents the other entities of the group from having to perform these tasks on a redundant basis. So really, mutualizing information at group level is something that we really are observing at the moment and shows a shift from basically having siloed tools towards more centralized KYC platforms at group level. So obviously, in an ideal world, this information could be tapped into on open databases, but obviously this is a market shift that we are not yet ready to experience. So at this level, what we see is that this is happening, but only at group level. So this mutualized approach really helps also improve data consistency, and again, helps to reduce duplicated process, and at the end also helps reducing cost to that extent, and becoming quite more and more popular. And then finally, the second is the one we introduced, is like the collection of client data from third-party solutions. So here it's what we were mentioning, it's really tapping into third-party providers and aggregating data. So that has also become a growing trend in the KYC landscape. It's really to help enriching and verifying client information. And this shift is really pushed by having an industry-wide push towards automation. So to that extent, it's really simplifying basically the process of collecting data and basically asking only to your clients to provide relevant data. And when it comes to corporate information, which is fairly standard, trying to retrieve those information on your own without having to bother your client with those client outreach, with those client workflow. So again, it helps really automating the more redundant parts, which I was mentioning before, and focusing on the client interaction just for what is really needed is something that really helps our client. And these automation processes help maintain up-to-date client information with this minimal effort I was mentioning, basically. So overall, those are really the trends that we are seeing for the moment across our clients. So we have had more and more requests, striving towards those type of engagements with our clients, so which is why we wanted to share them with you. But that's becoming quite interesting to that extent. So far, we basically now have covered the pain points and the way how tools can help streamline those processes. We gave you an overview of our platform and how it works with a demo, as well as identified some of the pain points that you are facing. So now the question is, do you have any questions, and do you have any interrogations in regards to the capabilities of our platform and how it could potentially assist you with those processes?
You can use the chat to ask your questions. There was one from Simone a bit earlier during the webinar, which was, do you have any OCR system checking the data of the documents? So as I answered directly in the chat, we can confirm that some of the modules are offering these capabilities. So basically, we gave the example of ID Now, which is the checking the ID documents, and that includes indeed a feature that collects the data from the given document, and which allows you to either populate this information directly or to compare what has been typed in by the client when it's requested for him to type in it directly, and then you can compare what is on the document itself and what has been provided by the end client directly. There are obviously other type of documents that can, and other providers that also include OCR tools. I would just stress out here that it requires to have some form of standardized documents, because obviously OCR is something that can work, but you need to have the document that following some given templates most of the time. I don't see yet any tool that allows you to really broadly and all kind of document collect the information directly. So at least that would meet the requirements of such process, which is the KYC part. Any further questions? So if that's very clear, maybe also just adding to the trends Stefan was mentioning, I believe that automation is obviously something that either you yourself, your companies, but also your clients are seeking for more and more, and removing some of most of the manual tasks without any added value. That's obviously the goal of such platforms, is to really optimize the process, remove some of the tasks that can be fully automated. So retrieving documents and data from data providers is clearly a trend, but it's also to make sure that your teams, the back officers, the KYC teams, have more time to analyze the files, the applications, and really be focusing on the important tasks that you have to perform. This is clearly something that we've seen, and we mentioned some of the providers. So currently, our clients are either using Graydon or Dun Bradstreet or Bureau van Dijk to collect that kind of information and documents, and it's pretty broad in terms of what is available. So that's it's an interesting trend indeed, as Stefan was mentioning. All right, if there are no further questions, we'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar. We'll be happy to share the presentation and some further information if you want us to. Obviously, if you have specific needs or questions, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to also organize a follow-up meeting and a more detailed demo of the tool. As Stefan mentioned, we have to stick to a certain time frame there, and not go into all the details and all the processes that can be tackled with such a tool. So happy to engage with you at a later stage. Thank you very much, and speak to you soon, I hope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.